Okay, good afternoon everyone, and thank you for coming to this 104th CPR-CSH workshop. I see many of you came, we are very glad of that. As you can see, it's a slightly different workshop than usual, but Mahalo will come back on that later on. Since we are running late, I would like to welcome you in this room. Actually, I would like to thank École Française who allowed us to organize this event at the very last minute in this room. I would like as well to thank IFI, who helped us in organizing this conference. So I would like to speak briefly. I would like to introduce you to the two directors of CSH and CPR, and I would like them to say a few words to welcome you. So first we start by Yamini maybe, and then we'll go to Nicolas Gravel. Thank you. No, sorry.
Okay. I thought I was going to get biscuits and tea and listen to all of you. But, thank you and a very warm welcome to all of you to this discussion. This has been a really exciting partnership for CPR. I think it's one of our longest and most enduring partnerships, which evolved, if Partho told me, over a cup of tea or maybe a glass of wine at some stage, and suddenly became a very vibrant and exciting platform for discussion and deliberation on urban issues. And I think one of the most exciting things about this panel, about this platform, is that it brings together a combination of new research, new ideas, experienced policymakers, experienced researchers to discuss and debate issues of urbanization in ways that are combine a little bit of informality and formality, just like our urban context in India is. I think it's been an important platform that has given new, younger researchers the opportunity to get important feedback on their work. It's been a platform for policymakers to learn about new research and to engage with research as they think about policy issues. It's been an important platform for CPR to get a much better understanding of the challenges of urbanization. And I think some of the range of discussions that we've had over the last 4 or 5 years or more. How long is this relationship has been 8 years. In fact, it's been quite inspiring for many of us at CPR as we saw how this platform evolved into, in many ways, we learned what it means to just fix a date and do something. Which for CPR was new because as good academics, we'd spend a lot of time talking about the importance of doing something but never got around to doing it. And it was Partho who told us the way to do it is to just fix a date and get on with it. And having done that, infusing a sense of regularity into this created and organized platform. And many of us were inspired by that and have tried to do similar things in other areas of research that CPR is engaged in. So not only has this partnership contributed, I think, in important ways to a better understanding of urban issues, it's also been quite foundational to our institutional trajectory and institutional evolution at CPR to build more such structured platforms for debate and deliberation. So thank you very much to CSH for being part of this journey with us. And I look forward to a really exciting conversation. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you very much for this organization. I'm very pleased as the director of CSH to host that 100. Oh, sorry, it doesn't work. Can you hear me? It's better. I should perhaps move here. Yeah. So it's very happy. But that is 100, in fact, 104 seminar on such an important theme as urban issues. And today we're going to discuss nothing else than the future of the urban research, or what should urban research be. I mean, it's such a fascinating topic. I mean, it's hardly worth recalling to you how important, urban affair is, especially in a country like India, in which the founder of the modern nation is credited to have said that the future of India lies in its village, despite the fact that, in fact, India is growing, has a very fast urbanization growth rate, and that, in fact, urbanization and cities are at the very heart of, the human organization since so many years. Even political science draws its name from politics, from police, from cities. And cities is at the very heart of, the existence of the human, as a social species that live together. And in fact, even though urban issues very often are looked at with some, feeling of sometimes pessimism or darkness, very often we oppose, the rural, fantastic life to the horrible urban life and all of this. But this is, of course, denying the fact that, people live much better life in city, at least in life expectancy, that, the productivity in cities is much higher than in the urban. One of the most of the wealthiest country in the world is Singapore, with a city-state. So you have all of these duality in cities, which you have all of the challenge of the human societies, and you have also all of the, the fantastic opportunities. And I guess we have a fantastic panel tonight that is going to look at some of these things from various angles, pluridisciplinary perspective, because we have economists, we have urban specialists, we have sociologists, we have also, I think, some filmmakers. So we're going to have a very multifaceted approach to that issue. So I'm very pleased that we have this fantastic seminar that's been going on for several years, 8 years. So in the next 8 years, there will be the 200 seminar. I'm not going to be here, but I'm sure that many of you will be. So this is what I wish that seminar, and thank you very much for CPR for holding that collaboration with us for so long. Thank you.
Marilyn, can you come to say a few words about the genesis of these long projects?
Is it fine if I'm here? Okay. I'm a bit stressed, I have to say, because there are a lot of people here and some very familiar faces that we've seen over the years. And really, I'm very happy that you've come also today for this panel, which is a bit special. And this is a special event, and we decided to organize this event a few months ago because we really wanted to kind of celebrate the fact that the seminar has crossed the 100 mark, especially me, because I actually missed the 50th seminar, because Pato, as Yamini was saying, is very strong on date, and the seminar, the 50th, was I think on a May, when it's very hot, and I said, no, I'm not going to be there. He said, we'll do it in May, so I'm very happy to be here really for the 100. And as Yamini was saying, it was not around a glass of wine that we launched this seminar. It was rather around a cup of coffee discussing other research projects that we were thinking of. And suddenly I came to CSH, I think towards the end of 2009. And then I wanted to have a seminar on urban issues. This is an area which is dear to me. And suddenly the opportunity appeared because Christophe Jaffrelot wanted to present his work on Muslims in Bhopal. And then we decided to organize a seminar. And the only date available for Christophe was last Tuesday of that month, which was February 2010 at 3:45. So we decided to block the date, and that's it. And it's never changed, come what may, except for today, where we have changed today the location and the venue. And this is really because we wanted to have a larger audience. We know that 3:45 is not always an easy time, sometimes for students, and we wanted to really share what we've been doing. I have a lot of notes and I'm too talkative, so what I wanted to tell you is that we want to mark the date, we want to celebrate, but we want to do more than that. We want to take stock of what we have been debated for 8 years, and we also want to look forward. This is an important moment for us to reflect on what's been done and maybe to think of what could be the future for urban researchers. And so before we do that and we look forward, I just want to take you rapidly to what has been done. There's an echo right now, isn't? No, it's fine. So I think there are so many of you that you can't see, but we try to really look at what has been done over a few years. But once the panel is over, I think it'll be nice if you want to have a look. We kind of try to understand the topics that has been discussed, the origins of a researcher, where they've been affiliated, and we've done a factual analysis of the topics that have been covered. And of course, we've been trying to have international scholars, and we had discussion on many areas. I think I don't remember all of them, but also debates on Indonesia, South Africa, Lebanon, London, And in that sense, it's been really trying to reflect on urban issues in India, but outside, and also large topics ranging from sustainability, citizenship, economy, and urbanization that will be debated today. What was very important, I think, for both Parto and I, and for those who carried on the seminar after that, was really to create a space where research is debated at length. And for those who have been following the seminar, I mean, they've always been very long seminars. Usually the speaker has a good 45 minutes to talk and really built on his research, explain methodology. So it's also a tool for learning for the students who come. And it's also been long debates, I think, because the rule, we like rules, Parto and I, it seems. So one of the rules of the seminar is also that till the seminar, till there are questions, the seminar doesn't end. So I think we've had a 7:30 seminar where people are really, on their chairs wanting to leave, but till there are questions, the seminar goes on. And the idea was really to create a space where practitioners, policymakers, students, citizens of Delhi could come, debate urban research and sound urban research. And we had really a great range of scholars coming. I can't thank all of them. I think their names are somewhere in the panel. You can have all the names, but that was very important. Is there anything else I want to say? Yes, and there's one more thing, two more things I want to say, and I'll try to be really short, is that, as Yamini said, I've been trying to think about what to just say as an introduction. And I thought that, of course, this seminar has been regular. I hope it's been a rendezvous for many of you to come and hear about what's happening in urban research. But I think it's also so that this is this kind of event that allow us to build trust and to build really long-term relationship. And I think the proof is, and I'm not going to talk too much about it, but there's been the project that we've been involved, Parto and I, with my colleague Eric Denis on subaltern urbanization, where we've tried to really have innovative perception of what is the future of urbanization looking at small towns. And right now there are two strong collaborations between my institute, the Institute of Research for Development, and the CPR around invisible urbanization, funded by the IRD. And there's also the research project that Olivier and Parto are coordinating around big data, social mobility, health and sustainability in urban areas. So the seminar has also been an anchor to be able to think in a long term of innovation in urban areas. And now I'm sorry, but I really need to, before Parto starts to introduce the panel, I really want to thank all those in CSH and CPR who have been working with us on the organization of the seminar. In particular, in CSH, I left CSH in 2013, even though often people still think I'm in CSH or in CPR. I mean, in a between gray zone, like most of urban India. And I want to thank in particular those who took over for the organization. So Rémi de Bercegol, who's not here, but I hope he follows us on Facebook Live. Jayani Banerjee, who's here, and she has to raise her hand somewhere here. Then Parul Bandari, who's also not here, she's out of India, and Christine Uturbin. They really have given their time, their energy to a workshop that Parto and I really launch and really care for. We try to never miss a Tuesday, but they've been really given a lot of their time. And in CPR, Banu Joshi has also been involved very much. And many of the CPR heads that I can see, and today in particular, Mukta has been behind us, and without her, this workshop would not have taken place. And I hope that the panel will be really opening up our eyes and telling us that what we've done is obsolete, and that now we really need to think further about our research plans.
Okay, so I think now we can go in the core of these events. Can I request you, Parto, to moderate this discussion, which I know will be of interest.
And my job is to make sure the panel speaks. So just to quickly introduce the panel. You have their names in front of you, but I know people at the back. God bless, I hope. There are seats somewhere else. I hope they're not too few. We have Kaveri Gill from Srinagar University. Kaveri, among many other things, wrote this wonderful book on waste in Delhi. And then, so it's a nice transition from that to go to Asim, who installs Those installations are artists, and therefore those installations reflect two kinds of, and Asim will correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I'm seeing, A, it comes from color, and B, it comes from impermanence. So what he builds, it's ephemeral and discrete. And that in some sense is a lot of what, except that waste in our cities doesn't disappear, it may disappear, it goes out of sight and goes somewhere else in place. Then we have Amita Bhide, who is from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai, and Amita is now the Dean School of Applied Studies, but an old friend, where we explored many things together. But she comes from a perspective that works with social movements and therefore brings a very distinctive flavor to the panel going forward. And I hope you'll hear much more of the voice as we go together. Next to her is Sanjeev Sanya. Sanjeev, after doing many things, starting off with the roads at Oxford, and then becoming an investment banker and an acclaimed author, decided to come here and essentially help this government frame economic policy. And not only is he framing economic policy, he's also gone ahead another step further to decided to frame urban policy. So he's one of the key authors of the national urban policy that's currently under drafting. But he's also got a very, if you look at his writings, he brings to his from his perspective, a very distinctive view on cities as such, and a view that is not conditioned by buildings, but very much more of the softer infrastructure around people and institutions that essentially come across to build cities. And then we have, in sharp contrast, you have Pankaj Kapoor, who is perhaps the firm called VSS Forums, and Pankaj is one of the earliest and perhaps the most independent real estate database firms, information firms, and essentially tracks over 100,000 projects across 60 cities of India. So if you want to know which place is really booming, that's the person to ask. But what he brings to a panel is not just the vision of the big cities, but he understands and is looking at India across space, and therefore brings it in a space, and we hope we'll bring that vision from way outside the metropolis to come. And finally, we have Anne Rich, and Anne's with the AFD, and we are delighted to have her with us. Because she's here and in a very different sort of in this spirit of Indo-French collaboration, we now have real engagement between the AFD and the Government of India's Smart City program. But I don't know whether she'll talk too much about that. She may not, but maybe after the workshop, you can talk about those kinds of stuff going forward. So, without further ado, the way this conversation will flow will largely be, I'll just pose a question to move to the panel. Maybe the first question to all of them, and then I'll let the panel take over. And feel free to ask each other, talk to each other. I'm merely to start the process off, and the rest of the conversation essentially with the panel. And so, which is why I tried to stay as far away from the panel as I could, while breaking the frame. So it's, so I'm really sorry that we couldn't. I can see many friends who are having trouble finding space, and that's the other apology that I'd like to offer to those who are in the room. But thank you so much for coming in such moments. So let me begin by asking Asim. What do you take from a city? How do you see the future of urban India? And does that at all, do you think about that when you're designing the art and thinking about the creation of art? Do you look to the future, or are you essentially trying to reflect what is around you and see what's in the present? We'll just pick up one of these.
Yeah, for a lot of my projects, I've been doing a lot of research on the particular site where the project is located. So, like I can give an example. I'd gone to Vancouver. I've been invited for a project there. And Vancouver, on the face of it, is trying to project itself as the most livable city in North America. And there's a lot of propaganda and not, well, yeah. Yeah, so they have like a zero waste policy. They want to have, in their sort of definition, zero waste going to the landfill by 2035. But doing in-depth research about the city, I found that actually they're really, really good at hiding the garbage and getting rid of it visually, not so much in terms of what actually happens to it. So for example, if petroleum price really shoots up, then plastic recycling is feasible, so it is recycled. But then when petrol price falls down, it's just chucked, just thrown away. And I found that in Vancouver, the waste segregation system is extremely systematized, and people really are very concerned about segregating waste into different bins. But I felt that it was more means of taking care of the guilt of consumption. So you consume and then you put it in the right bin and you feel you've done the right thing and you feel entitled to go and consume more. So then that's what my project was based on. So it drew from a lot of things that are actually already happening there, also historical things, but it was trying to point towards what could be a way of maybe extending life or adding some value to things that we throw away.
So in your view, even in a place like Vancouver, which is sort of seen as forward, it's still basically not left.
No, in the capitalistic model of economy, it's about profitability. Whatever, even design, if you look at the practice of design today, whether it's industrial design or urban design or architecture, I feel that a lot of it has got to do with what design will be profitable, not what will be good for a society or a group or the environment or whatever it is. So even sustainability is like that right now. It's a huge business, you know. The things that are being talked about in sustainability. Yeah. So I'm quite critical of the way, you know. So anyway.
Is that do you see capitalism as somehow inherently incompatible with urbanization and sustainable urbanization and a world that we don't destroy?
First of all, let me say that I am entirely surprised by the number of people in this audience. I signed up for it because of you, Partho, but I had come entirely prepared for a situation where there are more people in the panel than in the audience. So I'm quite shocked that there are so many people who really care about the future of urban research. Well, my own view is that a free market-based system is by and large the way is entirely compatible with urbanization, because most market-based economies have grown on and urbanized. In fact, virtually every developed economy in the world has ended up urbanizing. So we, if we want to be an advanced developed country, must prepare to be urbanized. In fact, I myself think that within one generation we will be an urban majority country. The problem is that this term capitalism is a vague term which catches all kinds of things. And I think in that context, you need to begin to think about what do you mean by a city, how it evolves, how it gets governed, how do people live in it, how do people interact with the built space and with the institutions. These are important areas, and I'll come back to it when we discuss what should research be like, because I have quite strong views about how urban research should be.
But within urban research today, the strong tendency is to assume that urbanization itself will happen as a result of agglomeration. Essentially, people will move from wherever they are into big cities, and that's how urbanization will be. And in fact, a lot of people in India bemoan the fact that it's not happening fast enough. Look at China, they're moving so much faster. At the same time, you have all these new technologies that are sort of coming up, which are essentially making the old famous model of single line manufacturing quite obsolete. And it's like anybody who has a little tiny 3D printer is sent off a designer somewhere and can customize that stuff and gets delivered next door. Which then one seems to think that maybe there are lots of small, very bright, smart cities, but spread out across the space, like India today. There are lots of, let's say, 50 cities over a million, or 500 over 100,000. How do you see the future of urbanization? Is it going to be these big hive cities where everybody is coming, or do you see them as being much more spread out and structured?
You asking me?
Yeah.
Well, of course, there will be many kinds of urbanization, and even in India, there are all kinds of urbanization. You have obviously cities like Delhi, which are just exploding out. But if you go to Gujarat, there are many smaller relatively. So India is a big country with all kinds of models of urbanization. That's true of any large country. But I think rather than discuss for the purposes of today's discussion, I think the more interesting thing is not about how urbanization should be, but how urbanization research should be. And I'll tell you why I have and this fits with the point you're making. You see, a lot of the urban research that happens in India, I'll tell you this both as purely a person who likes reading urban research, as well as a policymaker, has a fundamental problem, and I'll tell you what it is. The first, and several fundamental problems, but let me tell you, start with the first one. The first big problem you have is there's a lot of research in silos. Now, this is a form of reductionism, in the sense that you take all these little silos, somebody does research on how India should be governed, or the cities should be governed, and somebody will do research into how waste management, or whatever it is. But you see, if a city is an agglomeration and an evolving ecosystem of interactions, then in fact, researching any little bit of silos, no matter how much in detail, actually tells you nothing about how the city actually functions. So I have a real problem about this siloed approach to research, which is in my way, in my view, a leftover of this Cartesian approach to city building. Maybe Le Corbusier's blessings, but city is not a machine for living. It is an organism. It's about the interactions between people, buildings, institutions, rules, and so on. So I think that is one major problem that Indian urban research suffers. Now, this is a problem in many other countries, but Indian urban research is completely taken over by this business. Oh, I will go and research Dharavi in high detail, but actually tells you nothing about how Dharavi interacts with the rest of Mumbai at all, or anything else for that matter. Second big problem with research. Too much of it is done as cross-section and not time series. Now, why is this important? This is important for the same philosophical reason which I read. If we are dealing with a complex adaptive system which is evolving, it is extraordinary how little you know about how these systems evolve over time. In fact, just try this yourself. Try and find a good history of a major, not a minor Indian city, but a major Indian city, and you won't find one. I mean, so forget about a history of Kanpur. You won't even find a good history of Delhi or Mumbai. You'll find one which basically, all the ones that exist are firstly 30, 40 years old. Almost all of them ended independence, as if nothing happened ever since. And you certainly won't see a history of India with, say, taking Gurgaon or Noida into account. Now, Gurgaon is not a small place. It's been around for 25 odd years. It's got 5 million people living there. There's nothing written about this. So again, this is a serious problem. The third problem, and I'm going to stop here, there are many problems, but I'm going to stop with the third one, is as a policymaker, why it is so completely unhelpful, all this research, is that almost all of it is input-based. In the sense, it'll tell you a lot about, oh, we had GNURM, we spent so many million crores, and we put in so many pipes. 5 years after GNURM was put in an end, I couldn't tell you, did it actually improve people's lives? I can't tell you that. And I'm telling you, the real fear I have is that we'll do all the smart city stuff, and some people like it, somebody hate it, but actually none of the research will be able to prove it either which way, because we will expend all our energy in talking about what was the original plan and how much money did the MOUD sanction. It will tell you nothing about whether the thing actually got done, if a park got done or whatever, do people actually play there? Nothing at all. Nothing about what happens. And all of this, by the way, happens because of a fundamental philosophical failure, which is we tend to see the city as some sort of a static machine, that it's all about the inputs. If only we planned it and master planned it brilliantly, if only we did the governance rules properly, it would turn out beautifully. Nobody actually sees what happens. We don't see it as an organism that is evolving, and therefore the entire game is about urban planning and not about urban management.
As something here, you don't have to take the microphone away from Sandeep. So how do you respond? You have been looking at cities for a long time. I mean, how much sympathy do you have for this particular group, and how much anger do you have in slotting you into the boxes?
I think I just see it. So first, I think urban scholarship has evolved majorly, and thanks to your heart, I'm not congratulating.
Another microphone. In this case, I will take away Sandeep's microphone.
I think there's been a lot of evolution in urban research in this country. The CPR-CSH partnership has been extremely fruitful in terms of bringing together not just research in India and the subcontinent, but also the global south. Although I do feel there can be more talk, comparative work and conversations. But, I actually want to disagree. I'll agree with Sanjeev on one thing, that we need more data. And as we sit here and have this panel, there's another report, State of India Working, being launched. This is by Amit Basole and Srivastav and the Azim Premji group. So I want to take this conversation back to some other things which I would relate to the agglomeration question, the dispersal question. I think there, of course, on India, I feel your work on subaltern urbanization and the spread, growth of small, medium town India, that's fantastic. That is the picture. But coming to number one, employment, the fact that, Bhala and Das can conclude that the growth has been about 13 million in the last year, and CMI data can conclude it's 1.4 million. And we are waiting for NSSO data that is not anywhere on the horizon, tells us something about the priority for not just urban research, but more generally development research, implementation, outcomes, the whole lot by, the government and of course certain. So I'm going to just start with that. And there, of course, lots of manipulation even on, so labor force participation rates, unemployment rates, whichever way you look at it. But if the present government is also looking at employment, provident fund contributions, and looking at people who are switching jobs within the informal, counting them as net addition to the labor force, this is a problem. Why do I say this? There's another ILO report that's just out, the third edition on men and women in the informal sector. And India is up there with Nepal in South Asia. So we have 81% of our labor force, Nepal's 90%. And Bangladesh is 49, Sri Lanka is just 60, and indeed even Pakistan is 78. What is the profile here? The youth. So 15 to 24 years, and I work in Dadri in Greater Noida, so actually I see a lot of them on motorcycles. It's quite a scary idea, the youth, the demographic dividend as we like to call it. So 93% of that is going into the informal sector as opposed to just 67% of adults or people over 25 years. Almost a half of all employment in the urban areas is informal. And of course, a lot of this informal employment is happening globally. We are living in not such good times, but 93% globally is in developing emerging countries. So that's one context. And one other context is the human capital picture. So I'm relating all this because, I feel urbanization in India is going to be related to work. It's going to be related to survival. And I'm just going to, so on the human capital front, there's also work that at the peak of their lives, Indians will work for 6 years, the most productive kind of, and in comparison, it's like 20 for China, 16 for Brazil, 13 for Sri Lanka. So what are we looking at In terms of, and we know what the spending on health and education, we are still at 1.2% for health. We haven't even met the 2010 targets. On quality of education, again, we are down there with, I think we are better than Afghanistan, but otherwise in a ranking of 50 countries on human capital, we are like, on out-of-pocket expenditure for health and on quality of education and over, we are way down there, even in South Asia, and it's not just Dres and Sen making this point. There's a lot of data out there, international, we can say it's unbiased. So in that context, the way I see urbanization is more in the, sorry to say, Marxist, and there is a capitalist thing here, the need economy and the accumulation economy of, Kalyan Sanyal, Rajesh Bhattacharya, others. I think we will try to have bypass towns like Gurgaon, like Greater Noida. You have the immaterial service and, IT and all those kind of highly globalized, Saskin sort of global city kind of, hub going on there. And then you have all these millions who also have to eke out a living. And in this context, the GST hit the informal waste recycling sector, 18% slab. That's not gone down even though elections are coming around the corner. So we are really looking at quite, I would say, challenging picture.
So you can see that why often.
Just to everybody, there is a Facebook Live going on in the library, so all the speakers and you need to speak really in the mic. Otherwise,
Speak into the microphone, please. Very good. Thank you, Maria. So you can see, you know why there's a debate between Oxford and Cambridge. That's what sort of the time speaks to people around here, right? So Sangeet's from Oxford and the Cavalry is from Cambridge. Let me hold off your response to that, Sangeet, and move to public. Because part of this huge transition from away from agriculture to non-farm has been driven by construction. You will see construction happen around the world. What do you actually see? Who are the people who are building this future urban across the space?
I would say that it was highly capital-driven city growth. Yeah. So the way I see this, like last 12 years, and if you see when real estate market got liberalized and the FDI and the real estate opened, we have seen a lot of money moved in, and it has created good amount of price escalations in the market, especially in the land values. Yeah, land values, and if I did some kind of time series, and I came up like in the last 12 years, land prices have grown close to 9 times across most of the cities in India. So when you look at the urbanizations per se of the hub cities and the new cities getting planned, and who's building this and where they are building, and they are building because city got expanded because of prices rather than infrastructure. So, and that's where, so coming back to the informal housing and the social problem, in fact, when we introduced capital to the real estate, when the policy paper was drafted, it was written, then we introduced FDI in the real estate to build affordable housing. It did completely opposite to this. It only created unaffordability in housing. And this is not a case only for Mumbai or major metros, but it has been a case across the world. Majority of the geographies have really suffered something like that. All the major economy or the time in this series, whenever you talked about that, they all invited the good money, and everyone has seen a kind of asset bubbles, and mostly the real estate asset bubbles, whether it's China, India, Brazil, or even earlier in this. And this happened in India also. So who is building this particular thing is like city got expanded, and lot of money which was coming into the real estate was being used in purchasing the land, and land in the outskirts were cheaper. And as the money continued to be moving in, the land prices continued to be increasing, and the city got expanded farther and farther in this region. So there is a time, and it's like the way you say that look the thing into time and space of it. the time series. So there were policies which were investor-oriented policies. If you look at from 2005 till now, although we had a housing-driven FDI policy, but it was more conducive for the investor to participate. So prior to 2005, before the financializations moved into the real estate market, real estate was like completely home loan driven. So if you look at when 1996 or 1998, when the Nishwan Sinha's budget came in, when he opened the home loan market and mortgage market in the real estate, and we were coming out of the recession of 1996, the property prices were very conducive, and interest rate came down, and the real estate market grew. It was very efficiently being done. In 2005, the way the money came in overnight, like some of these companies which are defaulting, they were buying the lands at 2x and 3x prices than the prevailing prices. And it's like real estate is a highly finite. You do 2 deals in the city center, it has a cascading waves going across all the places. This is what happened. So for a very long time, as long as they were investor-oriented policies, like there were one person who's buying 10 property. Yeah, it is. So there's a very interesting thing. If you put this money flow in the different geography, you will see the similar phenomenon prevailing. So there was a period from 2006 to 2012 when most of the money was moving into MMR, NCR geographies. Maximum speculation happened to those markets. Then it transited to Bangalore, Pune, and other. The similar phenomenon happened. Now every other market has reached to a saturation because investors not really getting a return. Started moving a bit of a Hyderabad market because the reason is those are the market because of Telangana issues. Not many people were investing at that time, but it got resolved and money started moving. Having said that, most of geography reached to a threshold of saturation. Now I see a phenomenon of the Tier 2, Tier 3 cities also happening. So it's not just the FDI capital, but along with this, the other capital, which is domestic capital, investments, black money, everything went in. So it's not a case like even the smaller cities. I was doing a very simple example. We do a lot of consulting to the developers. Yeah, it is fine now. Okay. So there's a very interesting case study. I think I'm fine now. Yeah. So there's an interesting case study I just want to refer is that there's a developer who purchased the land 6 years back or 7 years back in Aurangabad. And it's between city and there's industrial space with Bitcoin in between. It's not meant for habitation, it's between nowhere. It doesn't interact to the industrial space, doesn't interact to the economy or the city's economy. And he purchased because the reason is during the time everyone was investing in the land and think about land price will continue to be growing. People don't really bother about that land prices should be measured by the weight on people on land or some kind of productivity in that sense. So people were investing just for the sense like you put the money in the land and land only appreciates and which will continue to be appreciating. So he put in that money and then he looked at his equity returns on that particular money and then continued thinking about his land prices would reach to this. For some period of time, his notional price and market prices moved in this manner. Today, he reached to a threshold that the market has started going down. So let's try to make a use of that particular land. His estimation was that the land value should be 80 lakhs rupees, 80 crore rupees. But having said that, you put all the probability and try to assess the best use. From all the angles, the land value could not come beyond 35 crore rupees. And he says that my parents will not be able to agree to sell. I said, even despite they agree, if you try to sell at this price, there would not be any taker because it's just a land value. There is no productivity defined to this because like you want to set up the industry over there, the MIDC is offering much cheaper rates. So there's no urban usage of that particular land can take place. So it's just a land dynamics in which the things really moved. So because of this, some of these places, the opportunity was available in the market. The developer went on and launched the project. They could sell the properties to investors. Even some of these big corporate who launched the project in the outskirts, like Boisar, Washind, and some of these places, they said that it's affordable housing project, but their property in terms of ticket size was affordable because it is far away from the city center, and it was meant for affordable for the ticket size. But it was no way cheaper housing, but a prevailing micro market prices point of view, that price was higher. It was not really attractive to the domestic affordability of that. So it was meant for only those investors who could come from elsewhere. So last decade, until the government changed the policies and brought certain changes, the property was being sold to the people who were buying third property, fourth property for investment. And that has been a theory of urbanization when you say that real estate driven urbanization. So in the outskirts market, it has happened. What all was interactable inside, that was also becoming uninteractive to the domestic efficiencies. Like I say, the way Sanjeev described that there's an organization, which I call its urban setting. Like, so the urban setting is that jobs and the diffusion of demographic.
We'll come back to the city.
Yeah.
In a sense of what's happening outside.
Yeah.
And let me hold the thought yours essentially of most of the urbanization that you see happening in other places, even in the smaller places. What you're saying is, even though in the initial part it happened largely as a result of German organic demand, in the last few years it has quickly morphed into much more, as you say, an industrial city.
Yeah.
So not just in the big metros, it's also across town.
Absolutely, and that's a basic reason. If you look at, there's a big struggle of a government of India, despite giving subventions scheme, despite giving all the incentives, it's not moving because the price has created spatial and economic disorder.
You have all these areas where you use a microphone. That seems to be a favorite microphone. So you have the essential world that you're seeing around you. And you have these people who quote unquote inform. I personally have, as far as a lot of Uber drivers are all informed. Airbnb is informed. So who knows what the future of the world is going to be? We have to be completely informed. But in Mumbai, which is the epicenter of the kind of phenomenon that how are people, with this kind of urbanization, what is the impact it has on actual urban processes? The kind of things that Sanjeev was talking about, the institutions, the spaces, kind of things that Kaveri was talking about, work, handling of waste. How does you work in M1, which is the waste in many ways of Mumbai? How exactly do people cope with the effect of this kind of urban process? Can this be the future of urbanization? Or are we rapidly going to hit some kind of
So I have two kinds of reflections here. And the first really pertains to Mumbai. But the second, I think whether this is the future of urbanization, I have some other views as well. So I'll take this opportunity to perhaps respond to both of these. In terms of just talking about how do I see these urban processes unfold in Mumbai, I think every dimension of the life in Mumbai has been impacted by the overall process of shift of the economic angle to the real estate. If at one point in time it was the textile mills and the manufacturing industry which was driving Mumbai, and in driving Mumbai it shaped a whole lot of institutions, it shaped the social relations as well within Mumbai.
I think if Mumbai got a name for being one of the more inclusive cities, the more cosmopolitan cities in India, in terms of just attracting migrants per se, and if you start looking at from which states are migrants coming, from which strata of society are migrants coming, then from all of those grounds, I think all data, including census data in Mumbai, will show that Mumbai till the 1980s has been one of the more accommodative cities. But this was also because this labor was wanted. There was a space for this labor, including the informal as well. And the informal was much more in the state of semi-formal, because they were being used as the contract laborers, the badli kamgars to the formal industries. So there was a formal labor, there was this semi-formal kind of thing, and then there were the informals who were serving the rest of the city. And even they had space, because this is the period when you saw legislations which were highly progressive, like the Slum Improvement Act, which recognized the slum as a space of habitation, emerged in the 70s, 80s. You had institutions. For example, the Bombay Municipal Corporation had schemes for water supply within slums, which were group-based, consistent improvement in other kinds of provisions to even informal settlements, all in this period. Then you have an opportunity which came through both the decline of the textile mills, the gradual movement of the manufacturing industry out to informal sites. So today, if you look at the sites of production, these are very much located within slum settlements. So you will still see garment manufacturing, you will still see whatever manufacturing activity today exists in Mumbai, it is all in informal settlements, or in settlements which are on a deteriorating scale, like Kamatipura or these kind of neighborhoods, or to the peripheries of Mumbai in places like Vasai or in Airoli and so on and so forth. Okay? So this is the structure of industry. And with all of this, you will see planning in Mumbai, redevelopment in Mumbai. It's become the real estate which has become the driving force for everybody. Today, I think every group in Mumbai has become part of the overall speculation. So a slum becomes a site of speculation. There is no other meaning for that. And so the state wants to have more slums. State governments are interested in driving slum policies, the development plan of the city. If you look at the developments over the last 15 years, the stake of the state government in driving the development of Mumbai has increased much more, because it wants premiums from the real estate development which would happen in Mumbai. Okay? So that housing, that real estate development, and the state's interest in that particular facet of, so development is FSI, development is premium, development is TDR. So, and how does one make it more and more possible? The economics of it, the feasibility of it, there are huge questions over all of that, but this is what is driving the state government, the municipal corporation. I think many of you may be aware that the development plan for Mumbai for the next 20 years had just been finalized. Okay? And it has been finalized after a preparatory process of about 7 years. It has taken so many years because it had to be completely revised. The first plan, which tried to alter and give a different political economy, trying to regulate the real estate economy to a considerable degree, was given a completely sabotaged by the real estate lobby in the city. And again, we are back to a frame where you give a flexibilized regime of FSI, TDR, and where all development in the city, including welfare, is contingent upon real estate prices. What does that make for the city? What does that do to people? What does that make to social relations? Just two examples I will give, and I'll stop here. One is today the slum has also become an extremely privileged place. In the ward that I work in, that is a ward located in the edge of the city. If you look at the living conditions, it's horrible, because you're living in land which is being constantly reclaimed. There are settlements here which are built on tires, so that they move up and down along with tidal flows. Okay? But that place which is built on tires, the rent there, monthly rent, would be about 7,000 rupees. So when you start looking at these kind of prices which are there, the slum itself does not remain an affordable place. Homelessness, therefore, which is linked to this kind of real estateization. Second, what happens to relationships between settlements? Something that was called community, I think today is completely out of the window. Today we see that developers manage everything in a settlement. So if you want to go for a picnic, oh yes, we will take you to a picnic sponsored by a developer. Okay? Youth don't have to find employment, Kaveri, because youth here are engaged by developers to take the consent of people. Okay? You have to watch people, keeping an eye on people, so that which developer are they signing agreements with. Okay? And this is not just true of the subaltern. This is not just true of the slum dwellers. You will see middle class people, they will wait for their buildings to become redevelopable. So each and every segment of society gets caught in this speculation drive. And I think it's something which completely distorts the way in which a city functions. In fact, to come to that last part of the question, in terms of thinking about what is the city, what is the future of urban, I think the goalpost called a city itself, to me, seems to be shifting. What are we talking about when we talk about urban? What are we talking about when we talk about a city? Because each of us carries, I think, a different imagination of what the city means, which is located in a particular historical experience and a location, or something that we see in outside countries, either based on infrastructures or based on particular social relations, encounters, and experiences of the state. And I think our goalpost for the city is diverse. It's changing constantly. And I think talking of everything under this label called urban, I think makes me extremely uncomfortable, because we are not talking about the same thing at all. We are talking about many different things under the urban. I do not see, for example, Sangli is a town which has had a municipality for about 100 years. Even, I think, just a little after the Bombay Municipal Corporation was formed, Sangli was a principality, and it has a municipal corporation now. It began earlier as a local body, local government, local council, they called it, under the principality. So it's got a very long civic kind of history. But its understanding and the meaning of what urban means there is very different. It doesn't mean, so I think an assessment or a conception of urban, which I think theories of urban have all been developed about economy. They have been developed about a particular structure of the state, of infrastructure systems, and how they have developed. I think in India, the city and the urban is developing along very different lines. It's developing much more from the below, in the absence of infrastructure, where people themselves are developing multiple infrastructure systems. It is much more about opportunities and privilege and how it is being distributed, how it is being controlled. And I think these are dimensions that we need to begin to even theorize and conceptualize cities, and then perhaps look at the future of urban. Because the minute we start talking about now we are located at a precipice of 35%, 30% urban, we are soon going to be majority urban. What does that mean? Absolutely nothing. Does that mean that people in Sangli are now going to have non-agro-based jobs. Even now in Sangli, Kupwad, Miraz Municipal Corporation, one of the biggest challenges in slum redevelopment was that about 40% people have all agro livelihood based people. So they have cattle, they have goats, they cook on firewood, and how does one accommodate that in a formal construction, which is what is the imagery the minute you talk about a city. Now think about all of these, and I think we need to really reconceptualize what is urban, and the diversity that Sanjeev talked about needs to be cognized head front.
So, you have this very varied, very different. But all I can say is, future urban seems correct because it all seems to be quite speculative at this point. But does this look, you work in South Africa, you work in other places, do you get the same conversations where you go, or are there much more definitive futures, much more definitive pathways to where people want to go?
No, unfortunately, I think it's the same in many countries we work with. The first reaction I had was, wow, what are we doing at AFD? I mean, speculation is driving everything, real estate is driving everything. Are we really, will we have an impact in developing, trying to help cities developing in a proper sense? And I understand why it's so difficult for us to work. And I mean, it's very difficult as well for cities. And that's what I found in South Africa, for example. In South Africa, I remember a discussion with the urban planning director of Cape Town, and she was a very lively lady, and they designed an urban edge to the city of Cape Town, and they said there's a strong planning tradition in South Africa, so they plan a lot, and they have a vision. So they try to put an urban edge to the city, and they showed the spatial development plan, which was so nice, and they had all these housing areas, etc., and it was very interesting. And 6 years after, I came back again because we were financing the city and the urban development of the city, and then I found her. She was desperate, and 6 months later, some big real estate project had been decided after the limit. And I mean, that's in Cape Town, that was in Durban as well. And well, the idea is that the cities can't fight against that. Well, officials in the city can't fight against that. It's very difficult because it's market driven in a way. So yeah, it's something we see also in Latin America. We see, and also the fact that we were trying to support social housing policies in South Africa or in Latin America, and you've got these very big policies whereby the government will give a house to people after the ANC promised black people in South Africa a house in 1994. So the whole policy is about trying to give access to this house, but where is it possible for government to build houses? Very long away from the city center. So the city are sprawling, and the cost of infrastructure to go to the city are very heavy for the city itself. To go to these areas are very heavy, and even for the people. 1/3 of the budget of the people in South Africa are for transport. So and so we try to work with then you have individual strategies, and we had these two brothers in the center of Johannesburg in the 19th, where the center was really deprived, that decided that they will do something for the city. And there was a lot of crime, etc. So they had some money, so they bought office buildings inside the city, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the whole area, refurbish them and transform them into affordable housing. They did a lot of money, and slowly by slowly, 15 years later, these areas of the city started to revive in a way. And all the small developers did the same thing. So it's real estate, but sometimes small initiatives can also do something. And now we supported them in a new way of trying to have communal housing where you can house poorer people, and it worked well. And after that, the city of Johannesburg, which was completely out of those initiatives, decided that yes, that can be interesting, and I can try to support those initiatives. So I'm not sure it's the right way now. The new mayor is doing that, so there's a whole other stories. But yes, it's a way you can regenerate city, but it's so if it's not driven by economic interest, in that case by some private peoples, and which had also a heart in the city center, it's very difficult to it's something that we can't provoke that well. We're trying to work on those urban regeneration, center regeneration process in Latin America, for example, and it's so cheap and so interesting for some of the local leaders to do real estate outside, in an affordable housing outside of the cities, that even if you've got land, public land inside the cities, they don't use it, which is really sad.
Indeed, it seems to come back to your core competence. It seems to be all about money. You know, whether it's about markets, it depends on what happens to oil prices, is whether waste will get recycled. The entire basis for why, when Amita was talking about the middle class waiting for the developer, I was reminded of Singaporeans waiting for their apartments to go en bloc. Is that what urban research should then be about? Just about follow the money? I mean, so look at that chart at the back, which Olivier analyzed, largely based on abstract. You see 4 colors and 4 clusters. And 2 of them are sort of linked to each other, and 2 of them are quite far away from each other. 2 things are far away from each other. One is a kind of rural space they're talking about, and the other is the kind of money and governance in that space. And as you said, they are operating in different spaces. So is that the one sort of binding factor we need to use to figure out what's happening?
I think the point I was making in my earlier intervention was exactly the opposite. Money is obviously very important, but the whole point about research is that you cannot think about these things in silos. And that's the point I'm trying to come to over and over again. When we think about what we have as cities are evolving ecosystems, which involve money, it involves governance and rules, people, interactions, economy, all kinds of things. It's about the complex interactions and their evolution that we need to study. And it happens within a certain geographical space, which may be expanding as well. The point I'm making is, much of the research, and the reason I come back to it, is not very useful to me as a policymaker, is the siloed nature of much of this research. So ultimately, it doesn't tell me anything about how to manage this city. It's not even very interesting, quite apart from as a policymaker. I don't feel like reading much of the Indian urban research, and I'm not entirely sure it's improving. And so the point is, this is part of the problem. And the most important part of it is that it is ultimately about a geographical concentration of people, buildings, and other things. And the best way in which I can show you how this works is just pick up literature on urban India, and you'll see something very strikingly different about Indian urban literature as opposed to in the world. Because I have worked in many other cities in the world, particularly including Singapore. And one of the things that strikes you is how few maps are in there. Now, why does this business of a lack of maps matter? I'll tell you why. Because you see, maps are a great way to encapsulate the evolution of a city and the interactions and the geographical nature of it. But maps don't exist. Instead, what you will have is a table, or even worse, a long discussion about Mahalo Councils or something like that, which have nothing to do with the city as it exists. I mean, it's a siloed one uni-dimensional view, whether if you take money or Mahalo Councils, either which way, both of them tell you nothing about the city. It's about the coming together of all of this that 99% of the game is. And that is why, and the geographical concentration of this coming together. That's what it's about. And so that really strikes me about is the problem with Indian urban research, because frankly, I think it's not improving at all. And putting in more and more effort into the current line of thought is not going to lead us anywhere. I'll give you some examples of how we could otherwise do it as a concrete way. Now, well, there may be many problems with Indian urban centers, and I don't deny them, but there are actually quite a few real good successes. Okay, I'll give you 2 examples. Any of you visited Indore recently will know that it is radically cleaned up. I mean, it is just striking. The moment you get off into the city, it really hits you in the face how clean the city is. It's happened over just in the last 2 years. Just 24 months ago, it was as dirty as any city in the country. Take another place, Amritsar, central Amritsar, the area around the Golden Temple. Again, dramatically cleaned up, not just cleaned up, done in a very aesthetic way by retaining the cultural heritage of the place and so on. 2 examples of great successes in my view. Now, in any other country in the world, both of these would have been great case studies, much read about, written about, systematically, and tried to spread. In India, it is extraordinary that neither of these 2 cases, which are now well established and agreed by most people to have been successes, there is no proper documentation of how it was done. Still isn't there. I've looked for it because I was looking for this urban policy I'm writing. I couldn't find anything on it. Excuse me? Yeah, they should write about a good study. The thing is that there's a great amount of research into these tiny silos, but this really important thing happens and nobody writes about it. This is the problem with Indian urban research.
Let me push you a little bit. So I see Dinesh there, and whenever I see him, I feel guilty that I write the next. So but we can think of, let's say, something like our metros as solution to transportation issue, and design things about how we do that. Or I can think about it as machine for making money. These are, each metro is 300 crore kilometer, I get 10% of it, and therefore the more metro I make, the more money. Both of these, depending on what actually is driving the construction of the metro, will lead to different research. One which actually is about transportation research and figuring out, the other which is essentially about governance and trying to figure out that story. Which is what I was talking about when I say that everything is building, as Anne said. Delhi today has built, I think at last count, about 37,000 or so houses, affordable housing, which are like empty in a city like that. Because it's built too far away for anyone to be, you really have to literally drive people with the tanks to get them to move there. But why would they build there? Because each of those 27 houses, 1,000 houses, is a big contract. So if I get into that more, then I begin to see this as the sole motive for that is driving urban development or driving transport. Do you not think that given the kind of governance and politics, etc., I'm talking about, is that the first explanation one should rule out before we go into trying to understand what the thing is trying to solve? Or should I say, no, that is, let me try and take that out of the way? Should I try and figure out who made money out of this Indore cleanup story, who made money out of the Amritsar cleanup story? Is that the question I should be asking? Or should I be asking a different question?
I think you have defined the problem very well by thinking about these questions in these silos. Why can't we just document the fact that these 37,000 houses were made and what happened? Just document it. Maybe some people made money, document it. The fact that people don't want to move there, document it. Document what happens to it over time. Just tell me how this whole thing is happening so that we don't keep continuously committing the same errors. And that is ultimately what research is about. It's about feedback loops. And in every society you will do things, some things will work, something will not work. Somebody will subvert it. But the point is, successful societies essentially document these things and keep adding to that knowledge so that we don't keep doing it. The problem is that in everything we will spend all our energy, kisne paisa banaya, let's do CBI inquiry, that is our thinking process. Net result is we are not making progress in any which way. We are no wiser after 70 years of being free about how our cities should evolve. The net result of it is, even today, most of the urban cores of our successful cities are colonial or pre-colonial. Even Chandigarh, which some people are very proud of, is essentially a housing scheme for subsidy scheme for civil servants. It's not actually a city. So this is a fundamental problem, is our siloed approach, not documenting the organic evolving nature of the city, and then trying to see what it is that we improve. Wherever we make an improvement, we replicate and see if it works and continuously add to knowledge. And that's the problem with the kind of research we do. It's simply not insightful. Doing more and more of it is not going to lead to anything better.
Doing more of the same thing, but okay. So good. So I see a lot of people in the panel who don't want to engage with each other. So let me just have that first, Amrita, then since the microphone is right next to her, then Kaveri and Nancy, come back.
Yeah. So I think there is a part agreement and a lot of disagreement, Sanjeev. In terms of talking about silos and the need to move out of them, I agree. At the same time, want to also register that there is a particular brand and mode in which urban science is being today created as an integrated science, which looks at both the material flows, inflows, the softer part. And that softer part is an extremely controlled kind of part. And I think, therefore, what I see actually is that urban research in India, I have not seen much of it so far. It is only in the last 8 to 10 years that one sees some burgeoning of it in certain, I would say, disciplines. So to move to a inter-silo, I think even within that we have not moved to comparisons between cities or to look at data which is like time series kind of data. So I think there is some scope for all of this to emerge and mature. So that's one. But at the same time, it's to control it right away, because my approach would rather be we need all of these disciplines to itself to also emerge. Where is good urban economics happening in the country today? Where are urban studies departments in the country today? So from different disciplines or good urban anthropology, there is research which is happening on India, but not definitely within Indian universities, Indian research institutions, and that has to grow. And we will move towards this interesting dynamic. There are hotspots, I would say, in multiple ways. But the second thing, in terms of documentation, I think my concern is basically that, are we really creating this space for documentation and recognition for all forms of knowledge to actually even coexist? Like taking this metro example, by just saying, for example, that metros belong to an essential part of infrastructure, therefore there will be no environmental impact assessments, there will be no social impact assessments. We are precluding an entire, I would say, need for growth of knowledge in this area. Because we have not documented how past public transport systems, including suburban rail system, land-based railway systems, bus systems in the cities have worked, what are their economics, whether the metro economics are actually going to be more feasible. What is the experimentation when you already have public transport systems like bus or railway and you superimpose a metro? What happens in those cities where there are no public transport systems and only paratransits and you superimpose a metro? Where are those differential studies?
Should we document or not document?
Of course we should document, but this has to be also officially encouraged. When we begin to talk about including environmental impact assessments, social impact assessments, I think that's needed, but that's being removed from policy altogether.
So part of that is also that in some sense these assessments were supposed to be, a lot of that stuff should have been part of the publisher. And so therefore these assessments would have formed some part of the documentation that we were talking about. And there is also a very large amount of documentation that students in our planning schools and structures and in various departments like yours, and yours, which somehow fall outside the zone of visible research. It's a way of either we don't value the research produced by young minds, or we somehow see them as merely training work, which doesn't have to be somehow made visible. Because, and again, in some sense also goes back to the notion of, I won't preclude you from contesting what the other one is saying, but also the idea that in education, the value you put on documentation as research is something that is it's usually considered relatively low. So if I just go out and put out the kind of documentation they're publishing it will be hard. Sanjeev has his own way of his own publication avenues, which many of us will not be able to. He just writes books and people see the Bible. That's one way of doing it. But for those else who sort of publish in journals and so on and so forth, this documentation is not encouraged as research. And yet that is what in some sense seems to be lacking at this point. So how do we get over this dilemma?
I think I had a couple of points. So firstly, I'm the kind of researcher who's very anti the Harvard case study. So whether it's in fact the material on smart cities, in fact the data on what is the actual empirics of diverting waste to energy plants just on a purely financial basis, given that it's gone into the PPP modality, we should have work across the country now showing, to what degree it's worked, it's not worked. That brings us to one of the questions you had raised when you had, sent us things to think about is interdisciplinarity. So this cross discussion between engineers, social scientists, other groups. But I want to say a couple of things here. Responding specifically to Sanjeev's point also about, I would say that the work on the Mahalo, if you look at the Cities of Delhi project of your own group, and indeed all the excellent scholarship on the urban, partly it's so hard to research the urban because this takes me to another point that Amita mentioned. Are we really talking here about urbanization, or at some level going back to Castells, Lefebvre, many of the Marxists and other thinkers, is it really about industrialization and urbanization, etc., or is it about capitalism? So when you are touching upon labor, you're touching about life, you're talking about society, community, social relations, creativity, imagination, to do the kind of work that is coming out. And I would again agree with Amita that it's only in the last decade that Bollywood is taking up small and middle town India in a big way. Social science researchers are doing that in a much more granular, it's not siloed, I would say it just reflects the complexity. And I will also make the point that I hope and wish, and it's true, that this is going to always evade policymakers. So to the degree that the subaltern thrives in the interstices of, not being subject to, quick sort of in and out approaches on, waste management or affordable housing or this or that and showing quick results. I think to that degree, one of the reasons why there might be a big divergence between social science research on the so-called urban, though I still think it's more about capitalism, and that's why Anne's point about seeing this all across the developing world or something, we have to ask those questions, if that's shaping what's going on. And the last point I wanted to make is this business about, structural transition hasn't happened in India. So the question about the agriculture and that interface with the urban, whether it's labor or in any other way, location and so on and so forth, that's a really interesting one. And again, it, I think, requires a lot of, in-depth, long-term work. And frankly, it's a lot of hard work to research the informal and the urban in a really sound way that at least other social scientists, I think, recognize. Then policymakers can do the hard work also sometimes and fund it.
Yeah, I think mostly all research sucks, really. Yeah. I think the point of researching something is not to publish it. The point of researching something should be to implement things, to experiment things, to, also to understand, of course. I mean, that's what hopefully your research is based on. And I think documentation and maps are as much silos as anything, any table, in my point of view. Because do you have to really be able to read a map to be able to come up with a good idea of urbanization? I'm not really sure about that. So I think one really major problem, I mean, I'm going into like a sort of conceptual sort of a space, is education and our understanding of our environment. Now, when we look at education, like we look at, for example, some kid going to school to learn a biology class, and in the biology class, he learns about a flower, the stamen, the petals, but does he know anything flower that's growing in his schoolyard or in his ghar ka, pot? Does he understand the life cycle of that? I'm not really so sure about that. So I think things have become very theoretical in the way we're teaching people. And that has sort of dissociated us from our immediate environment. And also education, unfortunately, getting really specialized, Everybody is like a specialist in something or the other. But they don't really understand the larger picture of how things work quite often. I mean, if you look at, for example, water management in India today, it's all done by irrigation engineers. They have no understanding or no communication with anybody from forestry or from agriculture. And those are things that have a huge impact on how water travels on the ground and how it can be collected or not. So,
I can hear you say more or less the same thing as Sanjeev was saying.
I agree with a lot of what Sanjeev is saying, actually, because I think what he was talking about, the city as an organism, as a living, growing thing, that is the key, actually. All these documentation and reports and whatever are it's just a photograph of somebody's life. And you cannot understand somebody by just looking at a picture. So I think, and particularly in the Indian context, if you ask me how research should be done, I think India has had metropolises for a long, long time, and we have built many, many large cities. So I think it's very important to understand how Indian cities were designed before the industrial sort of age, because industrial technology has had a huge impact on many things. I'm not saying that industrial technology is bad. I mean, we need industrial technology. What I think today is that, I mean, the things that are being talked about in terms of sustainability, things like closed loop systems, local renewable resources, these things are actually inherent in most vernacular pre-industrial practice anywhere in the world. So and in India, we are actually in a position where we are in touch with both sides. So we actually are, I think, in a place of a lot of potential where we can understand how our cities were developing, because at that time, the cities were developing very relevant to the topography, the climate, the social parameters. And of course, today we have moved somewhere else altogether, but there is still a lot, I think, that can connect the two and develop a perhaps a more sensitive model for sustainable development.
So I'm while gentle so I'll open up the audience in about 5 minutes. I know Sanjeev is delighted to see so many people and we're wondering what kind of questions you have around I'll start with the back and I'll work out the system, this thing, but before I quickly go there, Pankaj, do you want to reflect on any of the stuff that has come through, or would you rather let the...
Yeah, I think more or less I agree to the point, like, there has to be integrations of the problems which we are dealing with. You can't really solve the problem in the silos. But having said, if you want go deeper, you need to see the things into the silos, but there has to be a system through which we can really integrate. I'm saying that, the past research was different because we didn't have any data available. Today we are into different kind of economy, like we are into information economy, we have got technology, we have got apps, everything available. So we are into big data. And there is so much of data available. And having said that, the tomorrow's and future research should be linked to those data availability, and it should be moved from sample to universe analysis. I tell you what has been happening, that we go take few interviews and make opinion based on that. And I don't know whether my distributional sample is good enough to really represent the universe or not. That has been one of few cases. And most of the times, like I see that I've been a researcher for 20 years or so, I have structured the questionnaire, but having said that, I've never been sure about what I've gathered out of this is truthful or not. So the questionnaire-based survey has to be substantiated with some other more empirical data. And those data today is available, whether the people's mobility patterns, which Google tracks, or they are tracking on the Facebook and several other things. I think they should really be forming the basis of the research. It should be more empirical. They should be substantiated with several other correlations. I think our planning should also take into consideration some organic development ways. I've seen in all around, whether Mumbai, Navi Mumbai, or land pooling policy right now is happening, and why they stopped and to create Gurgaon as a political opportunity and all those kind of things. I see in our planning so far has been imposing, not really looking at the people, polarizations, organic development of the city within which it is happening, how the jobs and the people mobilities are interacting, which has been completely overlooked. The state to every other stakeholder has been looking to monetize rather than making it productive. And I'm seeing one more aspects of it. There was a time when the whole urbanizations were driven by money, but today's money has become unproductive. So that future of the research and future of economy and urban spaces are going to be rationalizing cost, making it more productive. The money employed has to give result and return. So I'm saying there's going to be changes in the urban entropy. I'm going to see that the changes into the behavioral of the jobs and the type of jobs, magnitude of jobs, and the kind of job. I think the future research should look at the changing transformations both in the economy, technology-driven job market, dispersion. We should be focusing on those sides.
University of California, they do specialize in and to take Sanjeev's thing about organic growth and your thing about structure, it is one way of research is how do I grow square tomatoes? I want tomatoes to be sliced nicely for sandwiches, and there are ways of boxing tomatoes and fitting them inside structures to make them grow square. And that's to meet the need for sandwiches. The other way is to get tomatoes to taste better. That's a different area of research. And what I'm hearing in some sense is a lot of Indian urban stuff is about trying to make square tomatoes. The shapes of the city, rather than the taste of the city, like the functions of the city. You know, what is a tomato supposed to be doing? But before I move to the panel, do you see the same struggle to plan, to somehow bring order? And you know, I'm amazed that we should be thinking about bringing order in a space that is as dynamic as, you know, planning requires a certain creativity. And yet, if you're growing at this kind of rates, I say China is growing at about 10%, going down now. We are now in the 8% range. Africa is growing at similar kinds of rates and parts. Can you at all plan these kinds of things?
That's really the question. I mean, that's the question we ask, and I wanted to ask you actually. Research should help us to see is it still possible to plan, because we're trying to support cities in planning, but we know that usually plans are not implemented. B, the time the plan is ready, the city is not the same anymore. So is there other kind of planning? Can we use those maybe business is planning differently now? Maybe new technology will help us planning differently. But that's a whole research area. I think to us it would be very interesting to find new ways of planning that we can use, or maybe give help city using, so that I mean we try and go somewhere. So what we used to say is, we still need to plan because we still need to build a vision. Even if the plans are not, used, at least the fact of planning brings people together and they try to see where cities, and I mean urban stakeholders, and they try to see where they go. At least, and that is at least something. And that was the first thing. The second thing is, of course, we need research on, what is a good project. I mean, it's very difficult for us to have a feedback on the impact of our projects. It's a real impact study is very, very long. I agree, it's even too long for us, but still, can we do something very useful a little bit with less time, but also, even if it's long, I mean, we still need it, because it's very difficult for us to know if the projects we are financing really do have an impact, and the good impact that we're trying to have, because if it's going the reverse, I mean, sometimes it does. So it's difficult for us we need that to build our strategies as well.
The only thing that CPR-CSH workshop has to do over the last 103 workshops, if you look at the word cloud behind me on there, is we managed to get people to talk about many, many things. That's a frequency now, which means the size of the word is what's used more often, and the only two words that sort of dominate that map is basically urban and city, and little bit plan and some development in equal measure. But we try to talk about many, many, many things, as you can see over there, all in different